like church.
So, how you been?
Pretty fair.
Still out driving county roads or anything?
Gonna get most of the staff here we're expecting. And we'll go ahead and do some introductions. I'll start, I'm Keith Braddock, I'm the chair of the County Board of Supervisors. And Marty, if you want to round out the county board, and we'll head out.
Tell the people in time to be quiet.
Hey, be quiet back there. How's that? Marty Poundbaum, Board of Supervisors, District 3, I believe.
Matthew Young, Board of Supervisors, District 4.
Jeremy Taylor, Board of Supervisors, District 2.
Anyone else out in the crowd? We gotta get some intros out there.
Pat, you want?
Mike Clayton, treasurer.
Pat Gill, County Auditor.
Dennis Butler, finance budget for the board.
Mark Nair, Woodbury County Engineer.
Steve Drew, boot tester.
It's working overtime.
Woodbury County Emergency Service.
Anyone else? You can tell everyone who you guys are if you want to. And the gal in charge of the place back there.
Everyone's directly behind the camera.
All right. Well, typically when we come out in the county, we like to ask our local councilman if there's any updates they'd like to give here. So any updates from the city of Pierson that you'd like to share? Or?
Not that I'm aware of right at the moment.
Update, I got a list.
All right.
We finished our source water protection plan this spring, and the city on our part will be planting 1 acre of native grass in our park around our wells. We wrote a MERD grant and put a walking path around that, and we'll have a couple pollinator gardens in that area. We also resurfaced several streets in town. We're getting ready to do a sewer project, and we received $213,000 for housing rehabilitation program.
Did you get the grant?
Yes.
So that housing rehab, was that a local?
HUD.
Okay, but was it done through Simcoe?
Yes.
Oh.
No.
Oh, no, okay.
Marine Corps.
Okay. Well, then I guess we'll move on to updates from the Board of Supervisors. I guess preferably I'd like to have our engineer start off with some gravel discussion. And we've talked a lot about gravel roads over the last couple of years. Most people really like really like how the gravel roads could be if they were fixed, I think. They're not in the best of shape, and especially this spring, we had quite a bit of rain with very little foundation to the gravel roads, so they're going to need a lot of attention and dollars, and we kind of have a plan that addresses this without using just local property tax as the only option to fund. So, Mark, I don't know if you have a map or you brought some things, I think. We'd like to come up here and just sit at the front of the table so everyone can see it there too.
Yeah, I did bring a map. We've had a lot of questions about what's been going on with the gravel roads and their condition this year. And they have been allowed to deteriorate quite a bit over the last 35 years roughly. Back in the early 1980s, when we went back in the records, we were hauling at least 200 tons per year to every mile of gravel road in our system. We were keeping up with the rate of loss from snow removal, from dust off, from aggregate being rolled into the ditch. Gradually, over that intervening number of years, that program has gotten smaller and smaller. Back in 1997, one of the things we found on the record is my predecessor had the very same discussion with his board that I had with this board this spring in response to all the criticism we were getting. Our surveyors, when they go out and dig for a section corner, the corner of most of our roads, used to dig through 6 to 8 inches of gravel before they hit dirt. Today, we're lucky if we find 2. And looking at the quantity of gravel that was put down in the early 1980s, we averaged over 175,000 tons of gravel per year. For the last 4 years, I've been buying 100,000, or roughly 60% of what we've put down historically. When you look back over those records, the county was buying between 550 and 600,000 tons a year, or 550 and $600,000 per year spent, and that never changed for over 35 years. Now we're spending even more. We're up to about 1.4 million to buy that 104,000 tons that we bought last year, in comparison to what that 170,000 tons cost less than 600,000 back in the early 1980s. Working with Dennis Butler to see where we could go out and find some money to help assist us with rebuilding those gravel bases. We've come up with possibility of financing it through tax increment financing. As you all know, we had a $2.1 billion fertilizer plant built in the southwest corner of our county. As that tax base comes online, it can help us pay for that gravel. We went through and took a look at our road system. We prioritized 742 miles of road. It's a little different than what's shown on the small maps that Dennis has, that will get roughly 2,000 tons of gravel. That's enough to build 4 to 5 inches of base over top of what's out there. We'll be doing some spot regrading to try and get our drainage and our ditches back ahead of putting that material down. Roughly 120 miles, the gravel they're getting and the improvements they're getting are going to be relatively unchanged. They'll see the same spot rock coming out to them, same blade paths and everything else. The other thing we're going to be doing is, in addition to our 63 miles of dirt road, we're also looking at putting in about 60 miles of low-end gravel roads into our level B minimum maintenance system. We're already not doing snow removal on most of these roads in the winter. They aren't getting much gravel as it is, but it's time that we sign them for the type of maintenance they're getting. So we're really coming at this with a 3-pronged approach. We're sitting on the aggregate to complete this program. We're looking at roughly $10 million worth of gravel. It's about, trying to remember what the exact number was. It's over 1 million tons that we'll be bringing up on top, processing and getting ready to haul out on the roads. We're looking at doing this project over 5 years, taking on about 150 miles a year. We'll be doing much of the work with our own staff. We may utilize some contract trucking. We're exploring leasing trucks and trailers to haul that with our own staff. We wouldn't be able to do this without that asset sitting in the corner of our county. The last work done, or the last investments done by private industry in the Port Neal area helped fund our roads for over 40 years. This new one's going to fund them in the next couple of decades, so that's the plan with that end of it. We'll be utilizing our new gravel pit at Bracy and Little Sioux Park. We have 120 acres that is mostly gravel underneath, just north of the park. We should be able to get better prices on processing the material with going after that larger quantity. So that's the plan with that. I know Keith wanted me to discuss gravel, but equally important is we're working on a bridge in cooperation with the city of Pierson. Pierson was able to qualify for used to be federal aid funds, now they're swap funds, so DOT is swapping state money for federal money. But they were able to qualify for city bridge funds to help replace the bridge out here on 110th Street, D12, just east of town. The bridge is ready to go in for permitting with the Corps of Engineers. we're hoping for a June letting on that for construction next summer, so that would eliminate one of the bottlenecks on the east side of town. We're also working with the city to try and get funding for the bridge on Minnesota Avenue. That's also a city-county corp line bridge. This year it finished, I want to say it was at least 40 bridges down the list from those that got funded, but as 25 bridges get funded, that allows 25 more to come up. So hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to see some city bridge funds coming in on that one as well. The intention in our construction program is that we will pave that north-south road then, once we get that bridge replaced. We'll then be removing D12 through town, going past the school from the farm to market system, and bring the farm to market classification down on the main drag, your city's truck route through town. I think that'll help traffic flow and actually put the farm to market designation where the road is needed. But that is the long-range plan for projects in the area of Pierson. We're also having the 5-year program. We call it Bridge A224. That's 3 miles east of town. That one's also currently posted in poor condition. It's also in the 5-year program for replacement. Our 5-year program right now includes 30 bridges that'll be done by contract. That's roughly 6 per year. We're looking at probably doing 1 to 2 small span bridges with our own staff. Some of our small bridges can be replaced with culverts, and we've been doing more and more of that work with our own crews now. So I guess that's the highlights for secondary roads. Perfect.
Question, what,
Sure.
you talked about the bridge that's east of town on Minnesota Avenue. What are you gonna do at the top of the hill there?
We're looking, we won't know until we actually go out and survey it, but it looks like we could shave about 3 feet off the top of that hill and improve that sight distance, and then lengthen that vertical curve going to the north to improve sight distance of that intersection. We want to rebuild that intersection as part of that project because it's been the scene of a number of personal injury accidents and several run off the road, so we'd like to fix that up while we're out there working on it. Part of the key is bringing that bridge up to a grade that we can pave, and we'll be doing that as part of the bridge replacement project.
Is that gonna be a concrete bridge?
Yes.
You're gonna have to raise it quite a ways.
Pardon?
You're gonna have to raise it quite a ways.
We're looking between 6 and 8 feet.
Is that all?
That should do it, really. Again, we haven't run any line on it. That's just going out there and eyeballing it to the top of the hill. There's, 9 to 1,100 feet, I think, between the bridge and the top of the hill. That's a lot of area to bleed off that grade and get the road through there the way we want to have it.
What's gonna happen to the driveways to the 2 residences at the top of the hill if you cut that down, did you say 3 feet?
2 to 3 feet is what it looked like. A couple of those driveways are coming up to the road a little bit right now. One I looked at was anyway.
You better go look at it again.
Well, you're asking me about a project we haven't even got on the table yet, Jack. So, yeah, give us a chance to really get it looked over. But again, that's what we were looking at the top of that hill to try and improve sight distance and to change the geometrics of that corner. We will do what we have to with the driveways to make them fit. And we'll try to do something that's not detrimental to the residents getting out there.
On the topic of gravel again, the county, someone recently bought a property with some more.
Well, that's part of that area right by Sioux Park. So last year, I think we took about 90,000 tons out of there. There's more that'll come out of there. That whole area, the old Brazy farm, that little Sioux property, about 120 acres north of the park. When we get done utilizing that as a gravel pit, it'll be developed as a park with the conservation department. Our staff is working on plans to, as we take the gravel and work our way south, we'll be expanding the lakes that are in there into a large fishing resource with picnic areas, campgrounds, those kind of things along the side of it. So we're going to be trying, as we pull the gravel out and move south toward the park, to utilize our strippings and waste material to rebuild behind us into what should be a nice asset for the county when it's done.
Mark, is that gonna help for a couple of years or more?
Pardon?
That pit, is that usable for,
Probably, we were figuring before we looked at a project of this size that we probably had 40 years of reserves out there. We'll probably burn half of that just in this one project. So 20 to 25 years ought to be left when it's done.
Mark, can you explain the criteria, how you picked these roads? You had two things you used.
What we looked at with the roads was anything with more than 50 vehicles per day or had a residence or farm operation on it. We looked at where we had hog confinements, traffic generators. We looked at school bus routes. We looked at mail routes. We tried to make sure that we were capturing the roads that had the highest traffic and the highest level of use.
Are you gonna put this gravel, are you gonna put all 6 inches on at one time? or-
No, we'll hit it in 2 shots. We'll come out, get the grade ready. We'll put roughly 60% of it down, allow it to work and pack in, and then come back and top dress it the following year. So you'll see the trucks hauling twice to each road to allow that gravel to be put in place. We don't want it just rolling around under people.
I'm more concerned in the winter when it comes, we don't push it all off.
Well,
You know, that's,
that again is something we work with our operators with, and we don't want it all ending up in the ditches after we put that kind of investment in.
so the parts of the gravel roads where you have no base anymore, and they're out there, especially the bottom of the hills, and is the gravel gonna be enough to put a base back in, or you think about using limestone on any of it, or?
And we're not looking at using anything that isn't native materials here. We've tried an experiment with limestone. Just getting the nearest limestone up to the county line was over $24.50 a ton. The gravel we're looking at here, once we get it hauled to the roads, will be under 15 a ton. And $24.50 just got us to the line. It didn't get us anywhere up farther into the county. We just don't have that good limestone source out here to utilize. We looked at quartzite the prices are very similar. We use quartzite on our granular shoulders. If you notice when we do a resurfacing job, we blend it with recycled asphalt. Gives it a little better sticking capacity. It packs better for us. It doesn't tend to wash when we mix it. But that material's over $20 a ton, sitting in Everest's facility in Sioux City. I wish we were closer to something else. I came from limestone country, and it can be a good material, just like our gravels. Our gravels don't break down at the same rate that limestone does. Limestone, even the 3I durability material, gradually breaks down, grinds down, dusts off. It needs to be replaced at a little higher rate than even what the gravel does because of the way it breaks down. The limestone sources we have around here down out of Harrison County are very soft material. They're talking about getting their limestone along the main Union Pacific line. Some of the counties are cooperatively bringing gravel from northeast Iowa. Over there they have a gravel source that they're almost giving away the limestone as a waste product because they're trying to get down to frac sands, which is a much more profitable product. So with rail and the price of the gravel, they're $11 per ton at some of those rail stops they're doing. They're looking at one in Atlantic and a couple of other communities right along that main rail corridor. Unfortunately, they don't serve us east and west. We've looked at a lot of alternatives, and native gravels can do a good job. If you look at the roads we built for the CF Industries construction, some of those, we've got a base built now that's between 8 and 9 inches out there on most of those roads. This spring, when everything went to pot, those roads were hard. And you didn't have to go very far south of those CF roads or very far east, and you found roads that you couldn't hardly navigate at times. Yet those roads we built with that native Woodbury County gravel did hold up well. A lot of it is you've got to have that gravel base out there, and without it, it's pretty hard to expect truckloads and the farm needs today. They can't run over 2 inches of gravel expecting it to perform like a pavement, but if we can get more out there, we'll sure improve the reliability of our gravels. That's our goal.
Would that be all for the engineer there, or any other questions?
Well, if anything occurs to anybody, I'll be
It will be here.
not going anywhere till you're done, so.
Go ahead and grab your map there and see.
Thank you.
I do have your level B roads proposed and the others, if anybody wants to see them before you go tonight.
Another couple of departmental updates are from Ryan Weber, our juvenile detention director. Says we've had a lot of usage from the native communities. We have contracts to take native youth that are in the detention system. So much so that, and for such a long stay, that an organization called Native Youth Standing Strong partnered with our juvenile detention to start a youth group for a lot of those kids, because they're in there so long with very little family that is concerned or cares about them, that they're just other individuals that will come and talk to them, spend time with them, kind of give them a mentor in society that isn't bound for jail themselves. He says they've also gone 2 years without any physical or mechanical restraints, knock on wood. From our conservation department, he's got a pretty good list for me here. He says all new sand at the beach for the Little Sioux Park this year. A lot of people have commented on that to me. We had our big HVAC project out at the Dorothy Pico Nature Center. That's something that the county board actually helped them with. Normally, most of the things they do are done with their conservation funds. The fiber optic was ran to the Nature Center with free Wi-Fi, and that was done through an agreement with FiberCom's donation. They refurbished 2 shower houses and restrooms at the Little Sioux Park, new paint on the inside. They purchased ground with conservation funds from the Zook parcel next to Oak Ridge, 82 acres purchased. At the Southwood Recreation Area, they built a deck and lookout tower. They added 6 kayaks. I think this is at Browns Lake where they have the kayaks for their environmental education programs in the parks. They're also doing a shoreline renovation at Browns Lake, getting better access to handicap accessible fishing and a jetty as well. It's a really nice handicap accessible dock out there that one of the few in the county right now. I think we're going to be getting a second one at Bacon Creek if I remember right. He also wanted to point out that a lot of these projects were done with grants from local sources as well as statewide grants. So that was from conservation. From the Board of Supervisors, we've had a few major issues that have been around, and I feel like they've kind of been pushed under the rug a little bit over the last few decades. That's maintenance of the courthouse itself. A lot of projects have been done. A lot of projects left to do. I would say our jail is a major concern for me. I see this, the building we have across the street from the courthouse and the shape it's in and the cost to do repairs It doesn't make any sense to keep sticking that money into a building that's not meeting our needs now, and certainly won't be meeting our needs for jail population in 10 years. We need more capacity, and just the sheer amount of repairs needed on that facility are beyond what I think is worth doing. And then, of course, gravel roads, which we've already touched on. Those are my three main concerns here moving forward, and I guess anyone else like to take over from the board here? I've just got to try some of that chicken.
I guess I just echo, as an educational point, the LAC in 1987 was built for 90 inmates. Today we're at a capacity of 234, and that's through double bunking. And the real issue is the HVAC needs alone are going to cost over $4 million. And those air handlers are original to the building, they're 32 years old, and their life expectancy is 20 to 25 years. And so our fear, and Matthew and I sit on the LAC expansion committee, is if in the wintertime those air handlers would go down and it's freezing out, you have to find within the matter of a few hours rooms for 234 all across the state. We can't do that. I mean, that would cost millions just in transportation costs, let alone the personnel costs to be able to help. And so we're really looking at a potential bond issue of $40 to $50 million, but building at such a capacity that may help in the future to offset that cost over 20 years' time so that it's taxpayer neutral. So that's the goal of what we're looking at. The other one I'd give is we are now fully in the mental health region. Rolling Hills, we moved away from Sioux Rivers, which was Plymouth and Sioux, into Crawford, Ida, Calhoun, Carroll, Sac, BV, and Cherokee. They have on population about the same, or just a little less population that we have in those 7 counties. But it's been a very good process. And just one thing to let you know about, there's a crisis and stabilization center that we have, but they're helping us with something called mobile crisis. And that's if somebody's contemplating suicide or they're threatening someone, these mental health professionals will actually go and accompany our law enforcement. Law enforcement's not particularly trained in that area, and so they'll help to take them, instead of just bringing them to the hospital, which is a very high cost, to bring them to our crisis and stabilization center. So things like that and those initiatives we see as a very good thing, and so far I think the regional relationship's been very good. So that's about all I have.
Thank you.
Going back to the jail issue, we have looked at several options. The reason we're looking at another location is that it was built over an old gas station. So one of the things we did look at was what it would cost and how feasible it would be to build up. But that's not really possible. We found out that it can't support the pilings, and it can't really, the roof is in disrepair as well, and there's all sorts of space issues that still remain. So unfortunately, it's a combination of issues that just over time makes the jail obsolete. And you'll be hearing more about this in the coming years, because even to fix an HVAC system, if it were to fail on an emergency basis, the law would dictate that we'd most likely have to go to a bond issue, and we have to call for a public vote at the next general election to do general repairs on the building. So this is an issue that we're going to have to face one way or the other. The other thing I'd mention is that the county has used some of its local option sales taxes for simmering quarry for the comprehensive planning, in addition to helping with Simcoe dues. So one thing I always like to ask when we go out to cities like this is, how is that comprehensive plan working for you? And has it increased participation in your community? Did you have a good experience with simmering quarry? Are you moving on any of those goals? So if the 2 council members do you have any thoughts on that?
Ours isn't finished yet.
It's not finished yet? Did you expect it to be finished by now?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have some good ideas in the works. We just need to
That's all I have.
I don't have any real projects to talk about other than what we've already discussed. The one thing I do want to mention is, after Mark talked about that gravel, is I've heard that talked about before I got on the board and ever since I've been on the board. One thing we want to make sure we're letting people know is this time something's going to happen. We're going to get something done with the roads rather than talk about it and then when the nice summer comes by, say, I guess we don't need it, and then talk about it again next spring. So work on that. And on the jail project, the biggest problem I have is I was on one of the original committees back in the 80s between the police and county when we were looking at a joint facility. And when they decided to go separate, it was a personality problem. And then the politicians got involved, and instead of putting the pilings deep enough that we could add up, they decided to save a few dollars and not go as deep. So then here we were when we needed to expand, and it was a neat design for that building. You could have added up, except we saved some dollars and didn't go deep enough, so we could add up. So the only thing I would say is hopefully we'll get this thing done and we'll let the professionals do it, and we'll stay out of their way if that's what the citizens decide.
Where would you put a new jail?
Pardon me?
Where would you put a new jail?
We're actually having a few meetings, even next week, with both the city of Sioux City and the city of Sergeant Bluff. You know, when you're looking at a project of this scale, and you have other communities that also have some different needs for their police departments, it kind of makes sense to exhaust all your options of trying to work together with these other communities. It makes sense to be close to I-29, because if you have to transport prisoners to, if you take federal prisoners and you have to transport them to either Omaha or Minneapolis, it's best to have a road nearby or even an airport nearby to transport with. So the answer is we don't know yet, but you're looking at anywhere from 4 to 7 acres to make a facility that you can put on a single level with the ability to expand new wings if you ever get to the point where 440 inmates is not enough to hold. Then you can just add another wing for another 220 inmates, and then you're up to 600 capacity. You know, we can't just build the jail we need right now. We need to build the jail that we're going to need 20, 30 years from now, so that while that building still has usable life, it's not unusable because it's too small. Which is kind of partially where we're at with our current building, except for the fact that most systems in that building are past their usable life. And the cost of doing repairs to stay there just doesn't make sense, because 80% of what you're going to spend in repairs is going to be the transport of prisoners to other jails while you're doing those repairs.
We've looked at sites as various as the old county home over at Prairie Hills. The problem with that is you've got to run the water and sewer unless you have an enormous, Encyclopedia Britannica septic tank out there. So we've got to look there, or we've looked at toward the airport as well. So we're going to continue some site selection.
Don't you guys own about that much land in Climbing Hill?
10 acres, roughly.
It's gotta be somewhat centrally located, for the court system and for the Sioux City Police Department, our biggest customer, to bring inmates to.
Yeah, there's underground water contamination issues with the community of Climbing Hill. Our well's fine, but if you put a setup out there, you'd have to get rural water to it, because you start pumping that much water out of the ground at Climbing Hill, you're gonna have contaminated water in that jail. I mean, we're pulling out of the ground down there now is acceptable, but apparently at one time there was like 11 gas stations in Climbing Hill, and as they closed, we never removed the tanks. So most of the people in Climbing Hill now are on wells on the school property, our property. We actually have 2 wells that are serving probably close to 50 homes, because we've got good water. You wouldn't want to start pulling that much water out of the ground down there. You'd have to get rural water to it. And that's got to come out of Cherokee, because we're in the Cherokee Rural Water District. we looked at rural water for Claiming Hill and we, with all these problems, and it was not even cost feasible to bring it. As closest it is up on, let's say D12, but I don't think that's right. Is there any rural water up here in this neighborhood?
L25 is closest, it is here,
Where?
L25.
Yeah, yeah. So, and they would have considered it if we could have picked up Mulville and Correctionville and some of the Pierson and have a bunch of towns along the way, they would have considered it.
Were you gonna say something, sir?
I guess talking about the jail just makes me nervous. The last one you put in last, what, 35 years? And then now you're gonna build another one for twice the money or more?
And I think that's a good point. None of us were on the board, by the way, back then. But yes, that's how do we do this so that we don't come 30 years from now and say, here we are again? And so I think, Marty's point was a good one. Sometimes you cut costs on the upfront and you end up paying for it later. And so, and as Keith mentioned, do we build for what we need right now? We're at 234, so do we build for a population of 234 and then find out now we were short-sighted because we actually needed 330? So in the design of this, they're not only going to add enough capacity that we could take on those federal inmates and help to generate the revenue to pay this back, so it doesn't just go to your tax bills, but also that we can have pods that could be added on. In other words, the 100 that we don't need today, but we do need tomorrow, then we can add on in a way that's feasible and you're not having to completely tear out walls, but it's sort of pre-engineered for that. But I think your point's a valid one. We're gonna have to look and make sure that, the shelf life of this thing is more like 100 to 150 years.
Like the one we have now should have been,
Well,
but it wasn't, so.
that's kind of the discussion back then, state-of-the-art deal, but within a couple of years, a lot of it wasn't functioning quite like the state-of-the-art.
Well, it was a good design originally, but like I said, politicians got involved in the construction part instead of letting the experts do it. And
Well,
save a
the
few
design,
dollars here and there, and
Designing the prisoners flooding the place whenever they wanted to, by plugging the stools or whatever,
they're gonna do that in every correctional facility.
That's
Not
what we
having
gotta
the toilets
kinda
over
figure
a
out.
judge's chamber might be good, right?
Well, they're constantly moving those
That's
too.
not quite true, because the jail back then was supposed to be designed with a thing called alligator that will eat bed sheets and anything they stuff that they chose to save some money.
Yeah,
and
they didn't put it in.
And now we pay for it.
And the other one is, any facility designed with HVAC has to have a contingency, right? If we have to shut this down and replace it, how are we going to do so with some redundancy? There is no redundancy there. So now, if we have an epic fail, the only alternative is to take those prisoners that are 24/7 risks, as law enforcement in the room can attest, and move them away from the facility. I mean, we have to have a smarter design than that.
The reality of what was built in the 80s too is what we're stuck with now, and all we can do as a board is learn from the mistakes and try not to repeat them. I can't make that old building have more capacity. I mean, it was only built to hold something like 90 people originally, and they were building for the capacity they needed at that time, not thinking ahead that maybe in the future we're going to have more population in the surrounding area. Maybe we're going to draw people in. Well, the surrounding area's grown. Sioux City itself, the population stayed the same. But yeah, the sheer amount of people committing crimes too that has changed from year to year. You couldn't tell me there was 200 homeless people in Sioux City in 1980s, but there are today, and we have to deal with what we've got. I can't change all those things. And the reality is, if we're gonna, plan ahead the right way, we need to have the right amount of capacity, not just for now, but for what we can get with federal, plus legitimately we could hold 300 people, or we could put 300 people in jail if we had the space, because some of the people have to essentially be let out or kind of given a good behavior, ticket-free kind of treatment, because we don't have the room to put them when we've got quite a few murderers in there and a few rapists and stabbings and some pretty serious crimes. So I'd rather see everybody that deserves to be in jail go to jail and have the capacity we need here in the future. And right now is kind of a great time to move forward with this. One, because we're over the capacity. Two, bond rates are pretty historically low right now. So you can actually borrow the money cheaper than the cost of construction inflation by a huge percentage. We figured a lot of our numbers at a 3.5% interest rate, and the bond rates are showing a lot lower than that in a lot of recent bonds. The other side of it is construction rates last year went up 8%, the year before went up 14%. They're projected 14% to increase next year. Had we been able to dig in the ground and start building the jail today, he said it'd probably cost $42 million. But by the time you get your bond issue passed, by the time you get to the point where you're getting bids, you're probably looking at a $50 million project because of the sheer change in construction costs. So to me, I see it as the time to start moving on it. You know, obviously I don't have that say, we're gonna have to leave it up to voters. But when you look at the three options, option A, do nothing, okay? If we do nothing and our jail fails, we have to transport 234 people to different jails. And we have to pay $53 per day per inmate. By the time you stick all the resources into transportation, the resources that you gotta stick into the per diems for 234 people, times $53 a day, times 365 days a year, you're looking at anywhere adding $7 to $9 million to your annual budget, which is about 71 cents per thousand to the levy. It's the biggest tax increase of all three options. So the biggest risk is do nothing. The second option is repair the jail we've got. So we borrow $22 million, we'd have to have a bond issue, that would have to pass. In order to do the $22 million in repairs, we'd have to transport everybody that's in there. That's actually, that's figured into the $22 million cost. With the bond rates, we figured it was around 33 to 39 cents per thousand to the levy. So that would be a huge tax increase as well. The third scenario, build a new jail at about $50 million. If you achieve zero revenue from a new jail, you're talking about 79 cents per thousand to the levy. Now this is again figured at 3.5% interest rates. So it's about 79 cents to the levy. That is the most expensive option. But if we can get 20 inmates at a little better rate because we have transport now, $85 a day per federal inmate, and you just have 20 inmates, well, that brings your levy down around the 60-cent range. If we can get closer to 100 inmates, we're actually going to be revenue neutral. It'll cost us nothing to have a new jail. It'll cost 0 cents to levy. Actually, it would save 3 cents in the best case scenario. But that's a lot of assumptions made, and I can't promise that. I can't promise that ICE is going to still have inmates in 3 years. I can't promise that the federal, because they've been trying to reduce the level of inmates they have, although they have had zero reduction. So I can't make any promises on any of those things. But the lowest potential rate increase is to build a new jail when you actually put the math to all the figures. I don't know if anyone else had anything else to say on the jail or any questions on it too.
Well, the reality is, if the HVAC system goes down, you're not gonna find a place to house 230 inmates, 234. The reality is, you're gonna go in front of a judge and hope that he's gonna let some people out of the community that probably shouldn't be out of the community. That's the reality. Because checking with all the counties in Iowa, I can get maybe 70 beds. So there's 130 or better. And there's no place for them. So it's gonna be a promise and a pier, and good luck with that. So then we'll be going all over the country rounding people up. So it's a very expensive and a danger to the community. That's the reality. We do this on Fridays, trying to guess who we can fast track, who we can let out because we're crowded. Judges don't like it, we don't like it, but that's where we're at. So the reality is, not to sugarcoat it, people are gonna have to decide what is a priority and what isn't. And if you don't think it'll affect you, I don't think that's a good gamble. Because burglars, people that commit crime like to go to places where there's not a lot of law enforcement. And you go out in the rural area and there's some open territory. So that's the reality. I'd like to paint a better picture, but I don't think we're doing that anymore.
You keep talking about your circulation, your heating system and so forth. Is it in that bad shape? Can it be something done to it?
No, those air handlers are original to the building, 32 years old, and we've talked about, you know, how much more patching they can take, but like I said, their life expectancy, Jack, is about 2 decades, and we're past 3 now on them. So there's no redundancy in there, and a replacement of those would take having to shut the facility down.
And they were initially designed for 90 people.
Right, so your ventilation, I mean, I don't really advertise it, but we need to do better.
Your plumbing, all those things were designed for 90 inmates. You're pumping that many more through it. And I get it, for a lot of people, they're thinking, hey, who cares? And, you know, it can be hot. I get all that. But who cares is the courts. And that's why we get drug into it. And then it ends up costing the county more money. The only ones that win in this are lawyers. That's
The building itself wasn't designed to allow a complete replacement of these systems. So what we run into is that the repair parts someday just won't be available. Just to paint the picture even more rosy.
Well, and then another thing to think about is how dramatic a facility to meet our needs is gonna be. When you talk about something that, if you hold 330 inmates, it's about the same cost as a jail that holds 440 inmates. So why wouldn't you build your biggest capacity? The price tag was about $1 million different. So you built for 440 people. You're gonna have courtrooms inside there, you're gonna have jailers. But all said and done, you're gonna have probably around 600 people in there in a day. And you're building a small town, you know, it's bigger than Pierson, it's bigger than all but I think 3 cities in our county is the size of our jail capacity needs. So it's a pretty large undertaking, and I want to see it done right. But obviously we have to ask voters for their approval on something like this. It's a big deal, and I know people aren't really wanting to spend money on buildings, especially probably for prisoners, but at the end of the day, they're either going to be in a building or they're going to be out on the street. And I got 3 kids, and I feel safe having them outside playing in your park here. But obviously I'm concerned. I wouldn't let them play in a park without me watching in Sioux City, and I sure as heck wouldn't if we had to let 120 people out of our jail. And I want what's safest for the residents of our county too, because what you could have paid in a small amount of property taxes building a new jail, or maybe it's a break even, I can't make any promises, you might end up paying for in lost or stolen goods or damaged goods. So that's just something to weigh and consider. And obviously as voters, you guys get to make that call.
Will this facility have courtrooms in it? Will prisoners have to be transported?
There will be courtrooms in there. We'll also have a transport unit, and it's kind of unique because the design of our current jail is inefficient. The hallways are too long, travel paths are wrong. In the new design, because of the way there's line of sight and the pathways that they have, it would need less jailers to operate efficiently. And we would move the people that would no longer be a jailer into transportation, so they would now become transport for those prisoners. So a lot of federal contracts require you have, or want you have federal, they want to have transport, and they will pay more per day per inmate if you have it. In Des Moines, they actually get $105 per day per inmate. Currently, we get about 58, but we don't have transport, and our facilities don't really meet their expectations. We don't have a rec facility in our current jail. And at some point, they could just ding us and say, you know what, we're not going to put any federal inmates in your jail anymore. And currently, Tony, do we even have any?
We're around 10.
10.
We try to carry around 21. Our population allows it, but our local population has been so high that we have to kick out the federal inmates first. And we were down 5 most of the summer because those are the 5 baddest that other jails in the area can't handle. So we said we'd keep those. But we're about to 10 right now, and we won't get to 20 any.
Right. And when we don't have 20, we're missing out on that revenue from the federal government. I can't imagine what it's like to be in Des Moines and have 100 inmates paying $105 a day times 365 days a year. You know, you're talking $4-5 million a year in revenue for your jail. They're making money off their jail, and here we are begging to, just get by. We're losing so much money in an old facility, and we could have revenue if we had the right kind of facility.
He's actually he's farming some out.
Is he? Wow. So, yeah.
He's playing a shell game.
Well, he transports his
X-
local ones out.
He gets X amount of dollars and they charge less, so it's just a shell game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all that is.
So this is something that a bigger jail like they can do right now is when you transport a local inmate to another local jail, you only pay $53 a day. So what he'll do is take his inmates and transport them out to get more federal in because he gets $105 a day for them. So he makes an extra $50 per inmate because he's getting rid of his, paying the local jails, other local jails, while he gets more federal income. Any other questions on that? I don't want to beat anything into a bush, but we want to make sure we get all the questions and concerns.
To get back to your question on courts, yeah, the courtrooms will be there. They're not going to be transporting them all uptown for the court cases.
And courtrooms in the courthouse will not be used.
Well, in our courthouse, we still will for major trials, but your normal court cases that are now held in the law enforcement center will be in the new one.
Well, different courts do different things. So some of them are doing family law, like divorces or custody battles. Some are doing parking ticket violations. The ones in the jail will probably be taking on the ones that are for the inmates in the jail.
And they do allow video too. They don't have to transport them.
There's judges in other markets like Minneapolis, St. Paul. So if you have a federal inmate that's supposed to appear in the Minneapolis federal court, they can video conference from within the jail rather than appearing in person. Any other questions for the group on any subject too?
Council happy with the law enforcement? Everything's good. Guy shows up and gives his report. Yeah. Treats you right, feeds you good, brings you stuff.
I guess if you want to take any pizza or chicken home for the road too, take a few pieces. I wanted to make sure we use some local restaurants here when we come, so.
Is there the crime rate in these local communities declined when you have the sheriff patrolling the towns like they do now, as opposed when they had to provide their own police department?
Dave, would you know an answer to that as far as?
The question, I understand, was does the crime rate go down into the sheriff's office compared to having a local police department?
Right.
What the question was? It all, Sheriff, I don't talk.
Well, it's just, here's where it comes down to is, we were going to the call regardless. If the town of Pierson, they used to have policemen here. And I can't remember if you ever certified anybody or not, I don't remember. But now the state is, you have to be a certified peace officer. And if you're not, then they have up to 18 months or something, and you gotta get them certified. If not, then there's all kinds of issues. So nobody was able to, or those guys got certified and they left. So then the town was out $10,000, and the money that it cost to pay them and all this. So we thought there's a better way to do it. We were going to the calls regardless. Let's take the towns and work in the towns along with the rural area. We have plenty of time, fortunately, on our side. We're busy, but there's times that we're not as busy. We're not call driven. Maybe like times the Sioux City Police Department's popping from one call to the next. We have some time. That gives us the time to get out and do our community policing and all those things. That's the good fortune of living in the rural area. So we're able to cover the communities in town and in the rural area, and we've done that for years. We have just taken that extra step by helping the smaller towns, by giving them the law enforcement, by having a 2080 agreement with the board, the sheriff, and the town. It's been a win-win, I think, for everybody that lives in one of these towns would say that they appreciate having that law enforcement in their community.
And you just had a kind of a huge success in a call response there, wasn't there, in
Mobile?
Mobile?
Yeah, we had, in Mobile, they may say they have a police department, but they have some police officers. There's a difference between a police department and a few police officers. Police departments run 24/7, 365 days a year. Mobile has an officer or two that work so many hours in a week. So when they're not working, we're taking those calls. Well, there was a 911 call come in, and one of our deputies was close, and was able to, with the AED, get that hooked up, got her heart going. Mobile showed up, Gary's team shows up, helicopter shows up, we get her out. Basically, Mike's getting a life-saving award, but it's a whole team effort. Mike kind of went above and beyond, we thought, and not only did he do all that, but transported the family to the hospital, and transported one of the family members back to get an extra car. I mean, real proud of him. I can't take credit for that. That's just good humanity, good, not only good police work, but that's just good passion. And that's what we preach, and I'm glad that he's bought into it. It was a great team effort by everybody. Gary's guys got a line going and picked and all that stuff. Because we had a paramedic, and helicopter came, took care of her, and the parents have requested to meet with our deputy. I want to thank him for saving their daughter's life. So it's a very cool deal. We didn't, too many times we're on the other end, So it's kind of nice to have one of these.
It's really nice to know that a young lady's gonna have hopefully a long and happy life.
And we purchased those AEDs sometime back on a grant, and they've been great to have in our car. I mean, otherwise we do it the old way and bust their chest compressions, we're not very successful. These AEDs are good for us guys. Mike said the biggest problem was reading the directions, making sure he was definitely right, but he got it down and boom, everything came, so. That's a scary thought when you're there by yourself doing that. It seems like a lifetime, couple minutes.
The girl was what, 18?
18.
Yeah. Mike or Pat or Gary, anybody else got a department?
No, I think I hope everybody's enjoying our paramedics or finding that they're doing a good job. We had another case this week with a 2-year-old that had an obstructed airway. Real team effort went into that, and the 2-year-old's fine. So, but, wasn't breathing very much when we got to him, but it's really fun to watch all this stuff that we've worked on all of these years come together and make a difference the way it does. I mean, we've had the defibrillators and sheriff's cars for, I think we were one of the first in Iowa.
Yeah, I think we were.
One, if not the first, we were one of the first. But we bought the Homeland Security.
Yeah,
So we just need to keep them up,
that's it, yeah.
because they're all gonna come up for, they have to be replaced before too long. They won't support it anymore.
A lot of that, we've been able to purchase some of that equipment, so you know, we tried for a MERD grant. We haven't had great success, but we also have a sheriff's foundation. People have donated money. We have a golf outing, and that money has got us about $13,000 in revenue. And then instead of going to the board all the time asking for different things, we've been able to purchase some things. Just for example, we purchased some ballistic shields and helmets because of all the rural shootings with rifles. And so we spent, I'm thinking $7,000 or $8,000, no taxpayer money. That was through a golf outing. And so we're pretty happy with that. Kind of nice not to have to go ask all the time.
We're very successful with families, especially the families of people who we've taken care of. Whether they make it or not, they want to do something, kind of get back for the help their family member got. So a lot of our volunteer ambulance services out here back carry equipment in them, and so is our department, that came from patients we've taken care of. People want to know what they can do to help, so.
Oh, I'd like to just say thank you to the Pierson ambulance. We had a call a week or so ago of a couple individuals that needed some help being taken to the hospital under a court committal, and they didn't understand what was going on, and they were scared that they were being arrested because mean, scary cops are in uniform, and they didn't understand, which I get it, but Pierson ambulance didn't have to, but we called them and they came out and were instrumental on getting these people into an ambulance and getting them to the hospital so they can get the help they needed. So they didn't have to do that, but you guys in your community, you know them, we really appreciated that.
That saves some combative situations sometimes when you have to serve some of those papers. And let's put it this way, everybody loves firefighters and paramedics. We're not always on everybody's favorite list, and so it really helps.
We like to say we patient first.
Exactly.
We like the canary.
Yeah, we are the canary.
All right.
Seems like I do a lot of the talking, but
That's all right.
it's about time for budget again. Want to compliment the supervisors. You talked about lowering your levy all the time, but I checked my tax statement and you were able to, your tax levy dropped $3.7 million. Why don't you say how many dollars you're saving instead of levy? I can't spend a levy at the store anyplace, but I can spend dollars. And dollars are gonna mean more to these people in your publicity than you're saying you're lowering the levy.
I think you're gonna see, Jack, with some of the new legislation that just passed, that we're going to have to provide what I think we've done with transparency, but in an even clearer way, to show folks how much tax asking we're really having, which is what you're getting at. So.
Yes. But in the past, it's always been, if we're gonna lower the levy, lower the levy. So what? And you spent up until this past year, I think you lowered your levy, but you spent more money.
Those darn assessments.
Yeah.
Where is that assessor, by the way?
Yeah.
And the assessor didn't make it out.
It's all this, different things you're spending money for, new cars, new trucks, more gravel, everything else there. But at least you budgeted amount of money. I looked at my tax statement before I came tonight, and you dropped $8.7 million. Hope you can do it a little bit better than next year.
That doesn't happen very often, does it, Jack?
No, it doesn't. I'm confident, you know.
A lot of that also comes from growth every year. Like in the city of Sioux City, they have a lot of TIF areas. And as those TIF areas every year goes by, they release more funding into the community. And I think we see close to, was it $1 million or $2 million in growth right there? And that's about all our budget even grows. And the only reason it grows is because every year we pretty much have about a 3% wage increase for our county employees. And that ends up equaling pretty close to that $1 to $2 million every year. So the actual new dollars spent on new things, it's not really there. It's paying for the same stuff with the new revenue by the new growth. That's how we're really budgeting.
But I like ending the meeting on your compliment, Jack, so I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I wrote it down, Jack. In 46 years, that's the first time I heard it. And that's good. It's better than
Well,
it should. It does.
With that, I know we're past 7:30 and a little bit further past than I thought, but thank you for coming. Thank you definitely for having us use your facility here at the council at Pierson. And we're adjourned.